150 minutes per week is a good number to shoot for. Exercise should occur on most days of the week, so it's better to break it up and do it 5 days a week than, you know, doing all of your minutes on 1 day a week. And you should also just consider how active you were before you got pregnant. You know, before I got pregnant, I was exercising, you know, a couple days a week for half hour to an hour. And so, you know, you want to think about that as you transition to prenatal exercise, because you don't want to have a big jump in activity that you never had before. So a lot of women are probably wondering what kinds of exercises are safe during pregnancy. I think there's a lot of questions about this just in the prenatal community. So safe exercises include walking, swimming, stationary cardio equipment. So if you use a treadmill or a bike or an elliptical, any piece of cardio equipment that you have at the gym, it's called steady state cardio a lot of times, but you can do intervals on it as well. That's a really great option because you don't have the risk of falling off of it. Prenatal yoga or Pilates is a great option, especially to help you strengthen your core in a safe way. You can also do modified strength training, especially if you've done strength training prior to pregnancy. And low impact cardio is great for you too. So you're not gonna wanna do a lot of jumping in the second and third trimester, but you can still get your cardio in and get your heart rate up other ways. And we'll discuss that later in this webinar. Some things that are unsafe, so any sort of contact sports, scuba diving, snow sports, and racket sports. So pretty much anything where you could potentially collide with another person, where a ball might hit you, a racket might hit you, quick changes of directions where you could fall down. None of these things are great when you're carrying a child. So you want to stick with, you know, more of the walking, the strength training, not so much the sport type activities. So there's a lot of myths about exercising during pregnancy. One that is pretty common is that your heart rate can't go over 140 beats per minute. So at one point, doctors did recommend this. This was a prior recommendation, but they've since found that that's not really accurate. What's challenging for one may not be for another, and vice versa. And they found that a better measure of exertion is a talk test or rating of perceived exertion. And we'll go over those two intensity ratings later in the webinar, but just know now that heart rate is not the best way to measure intensity while you're pregnant. Another myth is that you can't do any core work. During the first trimester, you can pretty much do most core work as you did before you were pregnant, with the exception of you shouldn't do a lot of twisting throughout your torso. And later in pregnancy, there's other ways to engage your core, and we'll touch on that as well later in the webinar. Some people will tell you not to start exercising if you've never exercised before. So now's not the time to start doing CrossFit or high intensity interval training. But even if you've never exercised, it's very safe to start walking, swimming, gentle prenatal yoga or Pilates. Those are great options for if you've never exercised but still want to get all the benefits of exercise during your pregnancy. Those are great places to start. And finally, some people have this idea that exercise can cause preterm labor, and the research has not supported that at all. There's no evidence that exercise increases your risk of preterm labor. So as you might imagine, while you're pregnant, you experience some musculoskeletal changes in your body. So this is due to weight gain and changes in hormonal in hormones. The force from the weight to your knee and hip joint increase because of increased weight in your belly. And your sacroiliac and pubic symphysis joints are significantly more mobile. This is in preparation for birth. And the joint laxity, especially the one at the base of the spine, so that sacroiliac joint, it can make you more prone to muscle strains in your low back, which is why pregnant women have to be especially careful whenever they lean down to pick things up, why you shouldn't lift heavy things, and why if you do have to lift something, you should always squat down to do so. So some more musculoskeletal changes that happen, you lose your neutral posture. You've got this giant weight on the front of your belly that's tugging everything forward and downward. So the rectus abdominis, which is the outermost core muscle or abdominal muscle in the front, it relaxes as it's being pushed outward, and the paraspinal muscles in the back take over to make up for that. And so this can be a cause of low back pain during pregnancy. You also have a change in the center of your gravity. So you're going to feel more off balance, and you have lordosis of the spine, which is that increased curve in your low back as your belly protrudes outward. And you have flexion of the neck. So your neck sort of leans forward, and downward movement of the shoulders. So you're sort of pulled down. You know, that belly's just pulling on everything. The good news is that there are some ways that you can move to help combat these postural changes that will help you feel a little bit better as your pregnancy progresses. So it's important to remember that your body's constantly changing, and you need gentle exercises to sustain and maintain balance, or maintain baseline, sorry. So some exercises that can help you with these postural changes are pelvic tilts, either side lying or on a ball, because you can't lie flat on your back to do them. So pelvic tilt is when you, the traditional one on the floor is when you lie back with your feet flat on the floor, and you move your hips towards your head so your low back flattens down to the floor. So you go back and forth between that arch where you can sort of slide your hand between the floor and your back, and then flattening to the floor. So you can do that same movement side lying or on a ball, and that's great to help restore your posture when you're pregnant. You can also do some seated marches, so sit in a chair up nice and tall. You don't want to be leaned against the back because you want your core to be engaged, and you want to lift one leg up and then the other, one at a time. You can also bounce on one of the big stability balls, and bridges. So bridges on your back with a pillow or a wedge to support you, so you're not lying flat on your low back. That's another great option to help with postural changes, and it engages your glutes and your core. So it's a really good movement to do whenever you're pregnant. Some general tips for exercising when you're pregnant. The American Council of Obstetricians and Gynecologists advise not lying on your back flat from the second trimester on. So that doesn't mean you can't do core work. You can do your core work in side lying. So lots of different variations on side planks, and you can do side planks on your knees as your belly gets bigger and heavier, and you know, straight leg side plank might not be an option anymore. You can lie on a wedge for exercises like bridges, like we just discussed. You can also do your core work in quadruped. So that's quadruped is when you're on your hands and knees. So exercises like bird dogs are great. You can do the yoga move, cat-cow. So whenever you arch your back and then round it, that's another great exercise that you can do in quadruped when you're pregnant. You can get your cardio through power walking. You can do jumping jacks on a ball. This is really fun. So you sit on a Swiss ball, and you start bouncing. And then you get your arms going up over your head like you would for a jumping jack. And then as your arms go up overhead, you tap one leg out to the side and then the other, and you get a rhythm going. And it's great for getting your heart rate up. Low impact, you're not jumping around, you're not jarring your joints. You can also do low impact dance classes, or like we said before, any sort of low impact cardio on machines, or even low impact moves, body weight moves. And another recommendation is squats. Squats are so good for you when you're not pregnant, but especially when you are pregnant. Like I said, if you need to lean down to pick something up, they're great. They're great at helping prepare you for labor. You just want those legs and glutes really strong. As for stretching during pregnancy, you want to be cautious of this. Your ligaments are already loose from a hormone that's released called relaxin. So you don't want to stretch something that's already loose and then push it too far and injure yourself. Something that I do recommend though is low back stretches, especially if you're feeling that pain in your low back. A great option for this is wide-line child's pose, which is shown in the picture here. So if you can just take your legs a little bit wider to accommodate for your belly, lean forward when you're down on your knees. This feels really good on your back. I also like to do one with the chair or a counter where you put your arms on the counter and you lean forward at those hips and keep your back flat. And I think that just feels great on your back. If your hip flexors are tight, so right where your thigh meets your pelvis, those muscles in there that cross over there are called your hip flexors. They raise your leg up, or in other words, flex your hip. If they feel tight, which they often do during pregnancy, try to gently engage your core and your glutes instead of stretching your hip flexors. And a lot of times if you sort of correct those postural changes that we were talking about, some of the tightness in your hips will go away. Strength training during pregnancy is a great option, especially if you've been doing it before you were pregnant. A hormone called relaxin is released to prepare the body for birth, so it relaxes the muscles and ligaments. However, strength training can help provide some stability to counteract that so you don't get injured as easily. And you should continue doing foundational strength moves like lunges, squats, deadlifts, rows, and upper body pushing and pulling exercises. So you're probably not going to be down doing push-ups, but you could do chest presses, you can do overhead shoulder presses, bicep curls, just most of the foundational strength moves you can continue to do while you're pregnant. However, it's important to remember that you may need to modify. I know personally I've had to decrease the weight that I lift just because the weight that I lifted prior to pregnancy gets me so out of breath, and my measure of intensity is up very high. And if you start to feel unbalanced at the end, which I'm starting to get to that point at 34 weeks, you can use ski poles or the back of a chair if you're not in a gym to balance you when you do those lunges or squats. Some other things to consider if you're exercising when you're pregnant. So like I said before, heart rate is no longer an accurate measure of exertion. You should use the talk test or rating of perceived exertion to measure intensity. So the talk test just simply means you should be able to carry on a conversation while you're exercising. If you can't, it's too intense of an exercise. Rating of perceived exertion is a scale, 6 to 20 rating on how hard you feel like you're working, so it's subjective. And a moderate level is 12 to 14. So you want to try and keep your rating between 12 and 14 during pregnancy. You don't want to push up to that upper limit. You should also avoid the Valsalva maneuver if you're weight training while you're pregnant. So this is the forceful exhalation against a closed mouth. A lot of Olympic lifters do it, like whenever they deadlift or squat with the squat rack. Most people don't do it when they're, just lifting weights on their own, but it's just something to consider. Again, continue exercising the way you did before pregnancy, just with slight modifications. And if you didn't exercise before, try adding walking or prenatal yoga or swimming or something light. There are some precautions that you should take when exercising during pregnancy. So you should monitor your intensity maybe a little bit more closely than you did before you got pregnant. So because that oxygen is directed towards the fetus, exercise that was previously moderate intensity may feel more challenging. I know exercises that I used to think were super easy are now moderate intensity for me. So just be aware that that changes as you're pregnant. Make sure you hydrate before, during, and after. This is important when you exercise, no matter whether or not you're pregnant, but it's especially important when you're pregnant. And it's also important to remember that your body's ability to control temperature is reduced. So you need to make sure you're exercising in a cool, air-conditioned area. If it's summertime, maybe not a good idea to be outside. Wear clothing that's moisture wicking so that you don't get overheated. And as another reminder, lying flat on your back can cause the uterus to press on a vein that returns the blood to the heart. So that'll make you dizzy. So just avoid that after the first trimester. Make sure you move slowly when going from the floor to standing to avoid dizziness. I kind of learned this the hard way. You know, if you get up too quickly when you're pregnant, all that blood just drains from your head and you feel so lightheaded. So just be careful of that. You know, if you're down on the floor doing bird dogs or something and stand up, make sure you get up slowly. And also remember that your center of gravity is changing, so your balance may be impaired. So move a little bit slower, have something near you to catch you, to balance yourself on if you need it. You should stop your exercise if you have any bleeding or amniotic leakage, any shortness of breath that doesn't feel like it's coming from exercise. So if you have any dizziness, feeling faint or headaches, chest pain, muscle weakness, calf pain or swelling, if you feel like you have decreased fetal movement, so it feels like your baby's not moving around as much as it was before, or if you feel like you're going into preterm labor. So basically, if something doesn't feel right, stop, hydrate, contact your doctor. I also wanted to mention diastasis recti. This is something that a lot of women have questions about in the context of pregnancy. So what it is it's a gap in the two sides of the rectus abdominis muscle. So it's that front, it's the outermost layer of your abdominal muscles. And as you can see from the picture here, on the left is how it normally looks, but as your uterus expands and pushes it out during pregnancy, it can create that gap between the muscle bellies. So it occurs during pregnancy normally and will often go away on its own after birth. But sometimes the tissue remains stretched and it doesn't go away on its own, and you can still kind of have this like little pooched out look in your stomach. And you're more at risk for this if you're carrying multiples or if you have weak abdominal muscles prior to pregnancy. So the big question is, does exercise influence diastasis recti? So exercise during pregnancy may help reduce your risk of developing it, but research is limited and results are inconclusive. So basically, they're not sure. However, some research suggests that exercises that engage the transverse abdominis may help draw the muscles together. So exercises like bird dogs, ones that are really good core stabilization muscles, they may help prevent it, but we're not sure. If diastasis recti persists after pregnancy, you can try doing those gentle core exercises that draw the abdominal muscles together. So you can lie lengthwise on a foam roller. So your head is on one end, your tailbone is on the other end, and do gentle knee fallouts. So you lower one knee to the side and then the other. This will help engage that rectus abdominis muscle. You can do bouncing on a ball. That's another great one. So bouncing on a Swiss ball. You should avoid exercises such as crunches because they push the muscles outwards. So you're going to be pushing them farther apart. And you can also schedule an appointment with a pelvic floor specialist who can give you lots of different specific exercises to help correct a diastasis recti. A lot of women who are avid exercisers before and during pregnancy want to know how to resume exercising after they have the baby. So it's generally advised to wait 6 weeks after vaginal birth and 8 weeks after C-section to begin moderate intensity exercise, but you should always check with your doctor before starting any sort of exercise program. It's really good to start exercising once you're cleared to do so because it can help prevent blood clots, which can be a complication after giving birth. You can do pelvic floor exercises, so Kegel exercises immediately after birth, and they should be done very soon after birth. You can begin generally walking a few days after birth, taking walks with your baby. Again, check with your doctor, but this is generally okay, you know, low intensity, no power walking here. I just wanted to mention also that regular exercise doesn't impact milk production if you're breastfeeding. I was reading some articles that some women believe that that was the case, and that's not true. However, you should remain conscious of hydration. So especially if you're breastfeeding, when you already need a lot of water to breastfeed, you're going to need even more if you're exercising. So there's two areas of focus of exercising after the baby that I wanted to highlight. One is pec stretching and thoracic mobility. So as you care for your baby, you might be leaned forward a lot, you know, to breastfeed, to hold them. And you sort of have those rounded forward shoulders, and those back muscles really need to be strengthened, and pec muscles need to be stretched so that you can help have good posture. And, you know, avoid that thoracic pain or shoulder pain that you may experience. Also, as I'm sure those who have already had babies might know, core strengthening. You're going to feel like you want to strengthen your core after you give birth. It's great to start gentle. So you could try postnatal yoga or Pilates. There's a lot of different studios and even some hospitals that offer these, and a lot of them allow you to take your infant with you. So that's a great option to start strengthening your core before you get back into your regular workouts. And these are just the references that I used for the presentation. And I just wanted to mention that we are doing a 3-week trial of prenatal exercise class starting next Thursday. It'll be 30 minutes and I will be teaching it. So if anyone's interested, we'll be sending out the details later as we get them ironed out. And if you want more information, or if you want to schedule an appointment, we are doing, you know, virtual appointments at Body Dynamics. And I have openings too if anyone wants to schedule an appointment about prenatal exercise. So now we'll open up the floor if anyone has the Q&A, if anyone has any questions about the presentation, any part of it.
So Ashley, somebody was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the setup for the bridges with a wedge.
Yeah, so they make these wedges that you can get. It's like a giant piece of foam. It's a triangle. It's higher on one end and then tapers off and is lower. I actually have, so they make these pillows for heartburn relief, and I actually had one for that, and you can use that as a wedge, or you can, I'm sure they make wedges also, but you can lie so that you're propped up. So you're technically like lying on your back, but because the wedge is underneath your back, you're not putting that pressure on the uterus. Or sorry, your uterus is not putting that pressure on the vein that returns the blood to the heart, so you're not going to get dizzy. So you can lie flat on your back, feet flat on the floor, knees bent, and then you can drive into the heels, lift your butt up off the ground for that bridge. You may not get as high as you did prior to pregnancy, but you're still engaging those glutes and engaging that core, and it's still such a great exercise to do.
And then how about a bird dog? How do you do that safely, Ashley, in the 3rd trimester?
So not much changes for a bird dog in the 3rd trimester. I've been doing them. You're down on your hands and knees. I wear a support belt down low on my hips underneath my belly to help me not feel hip pain whenever I exercise and whenever I'm up and around a lot. And I found that to be very helpful. So you're on your hands and knees, and you simultaneously extend one arm forward and the opposite leg back, engaging that core to stabilize yourself. So your belly is just sort of hanging. It might feel a tiny bit uncomfortable at first, but as you get used to it, I think it feels kind of good because it takes the pressure off your back for a minute. But if it's too much for you to do both the arm and the leg at the same time, you can just raise one arm and then the other, and then one leg and then the other. Great question. I should have gone through the exercise setup during the presentation.
Ashley, can you go back to that slide of the postural changes that occur during pregnancy?
Yes. The first one or this one?
Yeah, that one.
Was there a particular question?
It was just if I think maybe there was it one before that where you had listed what some of those other changes might be? No, maybe it was the one after that.
Exercises to do for it?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have the bridges, the seated marches, which I think I went through, but that's where you're sitting on just any sort of straight back chair. Make sure your back away from the back. You don't want to lean. So sitting up nice and tall, shoulders are back and down. Think about drawing your belly button in, even though you can't really physically do that while you're pregnant. And then you're going to slowly lift one leg up off the floor and then the other. So you're just engaging that core here. And then pelvic tilt, as I mentioned, that's where you're lying on your back and you think about moving your hips towards your face, and you're essentially taking away that space between your back and the floor. So you're flattening your back to the floor and then coming back up. And you can do that same movement when you're sitting on a ball or when you're lying on your side. And then we just went over the bridges.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, I think we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much, you all, for joining us. And Ashley, that was fantastic. That was really helpful. There's certainly lots more research and lots more information out there than when I was pregnant. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Oh, wait, we have one question about literature about returning to light exercise after birth. You mentioned that the recommendation is 6 to 8 weeks for moderate.
Yeah, that's from, I believe that's from the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. So that's like the gold standard recommendation. But as always, and that's where, you know, that's a great resource for a lot of just general information. You can go online. It's free, you know, accessible to everyone. You don't have to have like a journal recommendation on anything. Or also the American Pregnancy Association, their website is great too. So that's the recommendation for 6 to 8 weeks. You want to give your body time to rest and heal. But again, you can start doing walking, some very gentle like pelvic floor exercises, things like that. And just talk to your doctor. They may have a different recommendation for you, but that's the general recommendation for when you can start, you know, doing, you know, more of the moderate intensity cardio and things like that. And also remember that the first few weeks after you give birth, you need to recover and heal yourself, and you're going to be tired from all the work that goes into caring for a baby. So it'll be good to ease back into your exercise routine.
Okay, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.